Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Iwata, and you're here for the Kicking Off Adulthood with Your Healthiest Foot Forward, Setting Yourself Up for Success educational presentation seminar. A little bit about me. My name is Rebecca Iwata. My educational experience is as follows. I am currently at the University of New England Masters in Applied Nutrition program. It is an online program, and I'm expected to graduate in January 2020. Previously, I was at the University of Arizona, where I got a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology and a minor in Psychology. I graduated in December 2011. My background is mainly social work. I've done a lot of case management. My very first job was at Intermountain Centers of Human Development, which was a behavioral health nonprofit. I did case management for children and their families with who had behavioral health challenges, and basically made sure that they were all set up with different services that they needed, such as counseling, skills training groups, things like that. After that, I did case management at Simpatico Integrated Care of Arizona. It was the health plan for adults who had what were considered seriously mentally ill classifications. I did case management, which entailed making sure that they had all of their behavioral health medications. They were set up with therapy appointments. They had different supports in their lives. Sometimes they were on probation, so I coordinated with their probation officers, things like that. And then I'm currently in case management at Banner University Medical Center. It's a hospital here in Tucson, Arizona. I do medical case management, meaning that I work with adults that are getting ready to discharge from the hospital, and I'm ensuring that they have all of their discharge needs met. So if they need any sort of medical equipment, I make sure it's ordered and delivered. If they are transitioning to a nursing facility, I do the coordination of that and speak with the patient and their families about those discharge plan needs. All right, well, what to expect today? So we're going to talk about a couple things. First of all, we're going to talk about you. Well, we're going to talk about obesity, and we're going to talk about what you can do to reduce your risk of obesity. And then we're going to talk about some healthy hacks. So we have a couple learning objectives today. By the end of this seminar, participants will be able to do the following. You'll be able to identify the risks of obesity. You'll be able to describe how you can reduce your risk of obesity. You can construct a healthy meal plan for yourself. You can explain how you can grocery shop on a budget, a couple tips here and there about how to do that. And then you're going to be able to list various options for physical activity and explain how you can schedule regular physical activity into your life. So let's talk about you. So right now you're in college, the typical college lifestyle. You're staying up late, you have an inconsistent sleeping schedule, you're pretty tired all the time because you're so busy, and you're kind of fitting in naps here and there and may not be getting a full night's sleep at night. You likely have an inconsistent eating schedule, so you may be eating breakfast at a different time every day. You may be either skipping lunch or having a late lunch or an early lunch, or maybe just having snacks instead of lunch. As far as dinner, that could be anywhere from 5 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night. It really just depends. There's also not a lot of good eating options and choices around you. If you live on campus, you probably have some different meal options on campus, but they may not be the healthiest, or there may only be one or two healthy options, which you might get sick of after a while. There's probably a lot of fast food and takeout joints around where you are in school, so it's often easy to just order out or pick up food. As far as exercise goes, you may have a very inconsistent exercise routine or non-existent depending on your schedule. I know it's hard to try to, really juggle that and fit that in when you're so busy with school and everything. And as far as your weekly schedule, you really don't have a clear schedule. A lot of times you may have one class that's only meets one time a week. You may have another class that meets 4 times a week. And then you have to fit in studying. Some people have part-time jobs on top of that. And then obviously you have a social life. College is a great way to meet people and all of that. And you want to be able to attend social activities and hang out with friends and enjoy yourself as well. So it can be really hard to maintain a healthy weight when you're in college. On average, college students actually gain between 3 and 10 pounds throughout college. So it can definitely be a challenge to, really maintain a healthy weight and feel like you have some sort of semblance of control when your schedule is just all over the place. So I know this is where you're at right now, and you're getting ready to graduate. If you're here at the seminar, it's because you've been in college and you're anxious to get out in the real world and become a real adult. And I think it's good to be aware that your schedule is going to change pretty drastically when you leave college. So as far as the professional world lifestyle, there's obviously a bunch of different types of jobs out there. But we're going to, for the sake of argument for this seminar, we're going to kind of talk about, let's say that your job career and your job choice is going to have a pretty typical 40 hours a week of work. So typically that's Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, and it's a pretty set schedule. So if we're talking about that situation, you're really going to all of a sudden have a very set schedule. All of a sudden, every day from Monday through Friday are going to be at the same place at the same time. And then you're outside of work, you have some flexible time, but most of your week is spent in a rigid time schedule. So this can obviously be hard to adjust to, but this also can really suddenly show up with some benefits where you're able to now schedule and manage your time based around your work schedule. You may, now that you have set times that, you have to be at work and you're there for a certain amount of time, you're going to have a set lunch break, you're going to have set times to eat breakfast and dinner and all of that. So I think with a couple different, tips and everything, we can really make sure that this is something you can work towards towards your advantage. So let's talk about obesity. I'm sure you guys have heard about obesity. Maybe you have family members who are obese. Maybe you yourself are struggling with obesity, or maybe you aren't, but you are worried that could eventually be something you have to deal with. So there's many health risks that emerge when you become an adult. Adult onset obesity is one of them. It actually affects over 1 billion adults worldwide in the United States. There's over half of adults in the United States are obese, and it affects all genders and ethnicities. It really does not discriminate. So what exactly is obesity? So there's actually a formula called the body mass index, or the BMI. You may have heard of it. It basically is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. And that number that you receive, if it's 30 or higher, that falls into what they call the obese category. So that's the actual numerical definition of obesity currently. So with obesity, one of the biggest concerns is that you don't just have obesity to worry about. There's a lot of comorbidities that come along with it. So often if you are obese, you are at very high risk for developing type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, which is heart disease. All of these things go hand in hand with obesity. If you don't already have those, your chances of developing them are very high if you are obese. So let's talk a little bit more about obesity. It occurs actually when there's an imbalance of energy intake versus energy expenditure. So breaking that down, basically what that means is you're taking in more energy, which is food, drink, calories, versus what you're able to burn off, essentially. So most likely, most of the times when people are obese, it's due to diet and exercise related issues, but there are other factors to consider. So we're going to talk about a couple of those just so that you're aware as well. So some of those factors are genetic makeup, emotional factors, environmental factors, gender, and then the food intake and choices that you make, and physical activity level. So genetic factors. So people whose parents are both obese actually have an 80% chance of becoming obese themselves. Now, I don't want this to scare you. This does not mean that becoming obese is unavoidable or a guarantee. As we will talk about later in the seminar, there's so many things that you can do, and you really do have control over your life as much as you can. And you may not have control over your genetics, but there's things you can do to reduce your risk of becoming obese. So as far as emotional factors, I'm sure you guys have all heard about emotional eating or, eating because you're stressed, things like that. So eating choices and intake really can be affected by your emotional state. So often if you're feeling bored or angry or sad or anxious, this can really affect what you end up choosing to eat, and it can lead to overeating. One of the really effective way to counteract this is practicing mindful eating, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. As far as environmental factors, food environment is really set up to encourage unhealthy eating. There's food advertisings everywhere we go. Quick, unhealthy meals are available everywhere you turn, and portions at restaurants and takeout places are really excessive at this point in our lives. Gender is also a factor that plays into this. There's something called the basal metabolic rate, or the BMR. This is a rate at which food is metabolized in the body. And women actually do have a lower BMR rate. So they actually metabolize food a little bit slower than men do. So unfortunately, women are more likely to hold excessive weight. So as far as food intake and choice, again, this is something that you absolutely have control over. Your food choices really do matter. There needs to be a balance between energy intake versus energy expenditure, and you really do have control over food choice and intake. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. As far as physical activity level, the amount of physical activity you expend really does matter as well. Again, there has to be a balance between that energy intake and energy expenditure. You can choose to increase physical activity level so that you make sure that you're expending energy and you're not just intaking energy. So, like we said, there's things that you can do to decrease your risk of obesity. You can't control your genetic makeup. You can't control your gender. You can't control your environmental factors, but you can control your food choice and intake, your physical activity level, and you can do things to make sure that you're at a more steady emotional state as well. So as far as food choice and intake, the USDA has these dietary guidelines that they come out with every couple years. The current ones that we have been given are the 2015 to 2020 dietary guidelines, and they're made up of 5 key guidelines. The first one is follow a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan. The second one is focus on a variety, nutrient density, and amount of food. Limit calories from added sugars, saturated fats, and reduce sodium intake. And shift to healthier food and beverage choices. And support healthy eating patterns for all. So we're going to kind of dive into these a little bit more so that you can really see what they mean by these guidelines and how you can actually apply them to your own life. So the first one is follow a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan. So the USDA currently uses what they call the MyPlate guidelines. You'll see a little graphic of it here. It's basically the updated version of the food pyramid, which you may have remembered from a very long time ago, maybe when you were at elementary school, that there was a food pyramid, and it kind of showed that most of your meal was supposed to be made up of carbs and grains, and then protein and a little bit of fruits and vegetables. And at the very top, there was some sweets that you were allowed and added fats that you were allowed to have. Well, they have redone that, and they are now going by the what they call Choose My Plate instead. So this is ideally what your plate should be made up of. So what this is that they're saying that half of your plate should be made up of whole fruits and vegetables. A quarter of your plate should be protein. A quarter of your plate should be whole grains. And if you do have dairy, you should move towards a lower fat dairy. And as you can see, there's no added sugars, saturated fats, and sodiums and desserts and stuff on that plate. You're really supposed to reduce that as much as possible. So we're going to kind of break this down a little bit later on in the seminar. I'll give you very specific examples of fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and how, we'll practice building your plate up.